So for anyone who's new to AAI Employability, I just want to give you a little bit of an overview about who we are and what we do. So AAI Employability, formerly known as Adopt an Intern, is now a multi-award winning not-for-profit organisation that supports businesses of all sizes to reach graduate and returner talent of all ages, skill sets and backgrounds. Although we were initially known for supporting and facilitating graduate level internships, we now handle any job up to about 35k in salary and have a strong focus on diversity, inclusion, and this idea of establishing equality of opportunity in the UK job market. So now we support both businesses, employers, and job seekers to access placements and permanent roles with any surplus profit that we have going to supporting social impact projects and supporting underrepresented groups into employment. So why are we doing this? Well, at AAI, we know that employment is as much about you and what you understand about yourself and what you're comfortable in communicating to employers and bringing to the workforce as it is about what employers can do for you. So with that in mind, we wanted to set up a weekly series of webinars, which is a chance for you to check in with industry experts and hear tips, but also a chance to check in with yourself and to help you feel a bit more comfortable and confident about the strengths and the gifts and the skill sets you have and how to frame that in a way which will make you more attractive for your next job opportunity. We're almost halfway through this series. We've still got quite a few events coming up. Dennis, if you could just drop the link for the whole series overview into the chat. And we've got some really exciting stuff coming up in this series, including today's topic, which is a personal favorite of mine. You can see some of the things we've been looking at already. We've covered setting goals, looking at your skills through different lens, transferable and adaptive skills from previous employment and education. Last week, we were joined by AAI's talent engagement lead, Jane Sloan, who has personally seen about 1 million CVs, good or bad, and she helped us think about what we can do to really stand out on paper. And today we're going to be carrying on with that theme to say what we can do, how we can look at the things that we're close to and we care about to help us to be more employable. For the people who signed up to the session, which is scheduled for the 27th, you might have got an email which said that it has been cancelled. There's been a scheduling conflict. So instead, I'm going to try and cover both the importance of covering letters and job interviews the week after on the 4th of May. So if you haven't already, please do sign up for that, which promises to be an absolute bumper session there. So we can't all be in person, but I would still love to know if this is adding value to your life. Usually at these events in person, we get a chance to chat to people before or after, and sometimes people take pictures of us doing our talks and share them on social media. So, you know, if this is landing with you, if you're enjoying what we're doing here and delivering every single week for free, please do let us know. These are our social media handles. It really makes all the preparation and the effort that we put into these sessions worth it to know that it's adding some value to people across the country. So please do get involved. Last week, we went deep on CVs and the importance of really helping to sell yourself quickly. We discussed that recruiters, hiring managers, shortlisters often take less than 6 seconds to review a CV and to decide whether you're going in the maybe pile, the yes pile, or straight in the bin. So what can we be doing in those 6 seconds to make sure that we're showing that we're relevant candidates for the job that we're looking at? And we went through all these things here and had a good look at a good or bad CV. We're building on that theme this week. We've been joined by Chris Milborrow from Route to Marketing, who is going to talk us through how looking at your hobbies, your interests, and your passion projects through a different lens and being comfortable about communicating the skills and the experience that you've gained through those processes can really help you stand out from the employment competition. Chris has prepared a great slideshow presentation for us. I'm going to be interrupting him rudely throughout to get some context on some of the points. And please do get your questions in on the chat as we go, and we'll pose them to Chris at the end before we have a look at next week's session. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Chris. Chris, would you like to just give yourself a little introduction and tell us who you are and why you're here today, please?
Sure, yeah, thanks very much, Nick. Hi everyone, I'm Chris Milborrow, as Nick said, from Route to Marketing, which is actually, I suppose, my own passion project, which I set up basically really to try and support people looking for marketing roles to get ahead of the competition and to understand how to develop their own CV profile and set of skills to be able to land marketing roles. I guess the rationale for setting up Route to Marketing initially was having done a kind of dual degree when I was at university. It felt like there was a lot of really there's a really strong presence on campus from some of the large players within the accountancy sort of space and some of the other kind of larger employer kind of sectors, but marketing kind of felt like a little bit of an underserved market for particularly at the sort of graduate level. Jobs were kind of pretty sporadic and ad hoc, and it was almost Route to Marketing was to try and bring more of those job opportunities to both graduates and non-graduates, I suppose, but job seekers, I suppose, more generally, to give people insight into how to land those jobs, which are sometimes, you know, one job going in an entire company. So, and to be competitive in that process. So that's kind of why I set Route to Marketing up, and delighted to have the opportunity to come and talk about some of the, I suppose, the techniques and ideas for standing out.
I love that. Thanks, Chris. And I've had the pleasure to help Chris out with Route to Marketing a little bit. It's something that I was acutely aware of when I went back as a 30-year-old student to get a second degree. A bit of history about myself, which might come up in the discussion later, is I was of a generation where I went to the careers advisor towards the end of my high school experience, and they said, right, Nick, seem to be doing really well in history, so what university are you going to? And that was the extent of the consultation of careers at that point. I ended up going and getting a 4-year degree in Glasgow, a history degree, a 2-1 in history, which I didn't want to use. You know, I couldn't grow my beard long enough to be taken seriously as a historian, still can't, but I grew it long enough to be taken seriously in coffee, and so went and did that for 10 years. And that really taught me about branding and customer experience and how you can sell products to people, and really helped me to understand that marketing was really common sense for me. And when I went back to university, I was blown away at all the different people who were in my class and the different skill sets they had. You know, some of them were more creative, some of them were more strategic, some of them were more analytical. And it got me interested into all the different directions and routes you could take with that one bit of paper. And it's similar for any employment or professional discipline, isn't it? You know, you get a qualification or you get a label, but there's always so many different responsibilities and avenues that you can go down after that. And Chris, a long time ago, long before my time with AAI, got an internship with us back in 2013, I think it was. So he was on our email list, and he replied to one of our email blasts one day and said, I've been having this idea for a while. I kind of want to do events. Would you guys be up for it? And it was just music to my ears to be able to start doing events to talk about all the different ways that you can reframe your experience to make yourself more employable. So it's been an absolute pleasure to run events in person with Chris over the last couple of years, and we're hoping to get back to it and to run a similar series to this later on in the year under the Route to Marketing banner. So yeah, you mentioned that this, I'll give you a second to pull up your slides now, and I'll frame this for people, but you mentioned that this is a topic which is close to your heart because Route to Marketing was a passion project for yourself. You know, this is not your day job. You've got a much more kind of mainstream day job, but this brand has perhaps allowed you to indulge some of your other passions, things that you feel are urgent and important to you, and it spurred you on to put together this presentation to help other people understand how they can make themselves more employable by looking at the things they're already interested in. Is that about right?
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, you know, this is certainly a side project, but it's come out of an interest in supporting people to be more employable, which I'll go into in a sec when I talk about one of the projects that I had when I was a job seeker myself at university, and how that helped me get into various roles actually. I don't know. Do you want me to just kick off, Nick, or are you?
Yeah, I think to put it in the context, you know, last week we covered CVs and we talked about how if you don't have lots of industry specific experience, or let's say you're looking to change career, let's say you've had some spiritual awakening during the pandemic and you want to leave your boring job and start a new career, or you're a student and it's an incredibly competitive market right now. You know, we're all looking at these intangible ways that we can add value to employers, and you know, how can you stand out from other people who've got similar experience or similar energies to you? And this is a topic, I think, which a lot of employers expect people to understand, but really isn't spoken about in the job market. So this is probably for me one of the most vital parts of this series, because it's giving people the permission to look at the things they're already doing. And certainly in the last year, we've had lots of people who have been made redundant or been on furlough or been off work and have maybe felt the pressure to upskill or maintain a certain level of productivity. You know, there was lots of jokes about people learning Japanese and perfecting their banana bread and that kind of thing. But what this story is all about is looking at the things you're already doing through a different lens and working at how you can communicate that at a job interview in a way that employers will understand to help you stand out. So for me, this is a really, really important part of job seeking. Just to give it a bit of context there, we're going to be covering a lot of ground here. As I said, I probably will be jumping in and interrupting Chris a little bit with his permission, but please do keep questions or points coming in the chat and we can address them at the end. But apart from that, Chris, feel free to take it away.
Okay, great. So we've already covered pretty much the introduction, so I won't bore you with that again. With why I set up Route to Marketing. I guess just to help set the scene a little bit, this became something that I was quite interested in, given my own experience. So when I was at Strathclyde, I'd set up a society, a club, to help students become more employable, Bright Future Society. And from that, I got quite interested in you know, the concept of employability and how the various aspects of what Nick you know, has developed this series around, how they come together, how people can become more employable, and really how you can kind of, you know, give yourself as much of a chance as possible within the employment market, particularly at that point from a graduate perspective, and understanding how to really embrace the opportunities available to become more employable while at uni. So I started to write a blog about it, started to get quite engaged on social media around it with experts in the field as well. And I suppose inadvertently that became my passion project. And even more inadvertently, I guess, as a byproduct of that, it made me far more employable than I was before, because I could then demonstrate readership to the blog. I was getting invited a lot to go and write guest publications and things like Target Jobs and whatever else. And it was giving me a platform to go and, you know, develop my skills in writing, and also in things like social media and marketing around really what was, as I say, a passion project. So I'd often draw on that experience in interviews, and you know, it wasn't deliberate, but it would often become one of the strongest points that I would talk about, because I owned it and it was mine and I'd started it up. So that's, I suppose, a bit of an anecdote to begin, but really one of the things that I wanted to cover off up front was, you know, what am I talking about when I talk about a passion project? You know, it sounds fairly self-explanatory, but, you know, one of the things that I think, you know, and Nick's already alluded to it, possibly understated and not talked about enough, is, you know, being able to do something that you're interested in, but at the same time demonstrating the skills and experience and knowledge that will help you become more employable out in the market. So basically, there's a sort of Venn diagram there on the screen. It's being able to try and merge things that you would be doing anyway. You know, it might be a sport, it might be a hobby, it might be an interest, photography, for example. It might be something completely out there, but it's about how you take that skill and that passion on that interest and begin mapping that across to the types of skills and experiences that you think and want to make you more employable in the field that you choose. So we're talking about marketing more generally, kind of broadly here, but more specifically, it might not be a marketing career. It might be something that's to do with, you know, budgeting or, you know, being able to demonstrate skills that are maybe not marketing specific, but we'll talk about marketing for the purposes of this. So it's about trying to marry those two things together and do things that you enjoy, that you'd be doing anyway, and also develop skills at the same time. And most importantly, I suppose on that slide, is it shouldn't feel like work. You know, it should be something that you genuinely enjoy getting up. You're probably not going to be getting paid for it, at least at the start. So it's something that you need to be wanting to get up and doing without feeling like it's a real burden. So I guess, who is it for? I mean, anyone really is the cop-out answer to that. You know, it doesn't really matter whether you're someone who's looking for a new role straight out of university, or looking to upskill or change career, or somebody who just, you know, you just want to do something a bit different, you know, on the side, like myself, you know. So really it's about understanding, you know, where a passion project would fit within your schedule, and if it's something that you think will either benefit you or interest you, then it's for you. There's no sort of box that you need to tick here to be eligible to do this. So I suppose, you know, there's sort of three main challenges that I see this type of sort of passion project and that kind of type of activity really being able to counter. So the first challenge really, and I guess the guys at AAI will have talked about this a lot, is, you know, the expectations, even at an entry-level job, are pretty high. You know, the standard is very high, and what you'll begin to find more and more as the job market becomes even more competitive is that bar is going to lift. You know, it's not going to get any easier. So the amount of experience that you can develop and articulate, most importantly, is going to be vital in standing you out from the crowd. And I think, you know, one of the things that I really struggle with, and one of the things that I think is quite unfair, to be honest, are these jobs that are entry level, but they require 2 and 3 years experience in the discipline that you're trying to break into. I'm imagining that there's not many people with a camera on, but I'd imagine that probably sounds pretty familiar, and a lot of you are nodding at that to say, how am I meant to demonstrate 2 years experience in something that I'm just trying to get into? Passion projects is a brilliant way of doing that and breaking that down, because you don't need to pass a CV or an assessment centre to get into a passion project, right? So it's on your terms, and you can develop the role, the remit, and the roles and responsibilities that you want within that. So it helps you overcome that. We're looking for experience. Well, I can demonstrate experience. I didn't get paid for it, but I can still demonstrate that I've done this, and I'm able to do it for you. The second one is really for those who are maybe already in work, or feel that they're maybe underemployed, doing a role that, you know, is paying the bills, but, you know, I'm not developing the types of skills that I want to be developing in my day-to-day role, and that's fine. what passion projects allow you to do is develop the skills that you think you're going to need, you know, in a role that you're going to want to be in, and develop those types of skills and you know, regardless of what your current role is. So that might include things like being able to lead, take decisions, you know, the things that there's maybe barriers to in your current role, where there's someone, you know, that always makes the decisions on your behalf or on behalf of the team, or you've not got, you know, maybe the level of responsibility and decision making that you want. And also, there importantly, maybe not the opportunities to experiment. If you're in a role that's quite restrictive at the moment, you might want to go and test stuff out, try stuff out, fail, you know, get familiar with various different techniques, and maybe not have the flexibility in your current role to do that. If you own it, if it's yours and it's fairly risk-free, if it you know, goes belly up, then you've got you've got an opportunity there to test stuff out. And then the last one really is linked to that. You know, you might be in a role where, you know, you're in a good role, it pays the bills, you know, there's a career opportunity available within it, but there might still be something that you want to do on the side, you know, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So passion projects can often develop that outlet for, you know, I think there's a lot of talk now about the whole kind of the whole experience, not just the work-life balance is one thing, but that life bit is becoming more and more important, you know, and if you can add elements of that keep you excited, keep you engaged, and keep you motivated, then sometimes it's a good outlet for some of that well-being, and, you know, the things that would constitute life and be that tiny little bit that were in the work-life balance in the past are now becoming far more important.
I think that's been key in this last year, is if people have been feeling bogged down or they've lost a sense of control, it's like, what are they doing in their own lives to make them feel like they've got control and happiness and so on. And even, you know, we've called this session Reframing Passion Projects and Hobbies, but even that name, Passion Projects, the project title just gives it a much more formal framing. So that even, you know, it's something which is a hobby to yourself. Let's say you've set up a website for, you know, your five-a-side football team. You know, even by looking at it through that different lens of it's a project, it's not a side hustle or any of these other silly terms. It's something which employers can really start to understand, and you can help to understand how this can be transferable. We did a whole session on transferable skills from past employment and education, and I really encourage people not to hide from some of the things they might have picked up from retail jobs or hospitality, and this just ties right into that. Every single day, no matter what we're doing, every interaction we have, whether it's professional or social, we're picking up these different skills. And just to take a step back, zoom out a little bit and look at the big picture. How can I use different language to describe the things I've picked up along the way? So even just that word project is so key for people to understand at this stage in the presentation, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just to touch on the transferable skills point you made, you know, that's the key one, and that transferable skills are exactly that. They can be transferred from context to context. So if you're developing these skills in a context that you've set the parameters around, i.e., you know, something that you're passionate about, then you can still talk about that and reference that within a work context. In fact, it's sometimes a lot easier to reference that instead of trying to crowbar an experience from a really unrelated sector or job experience into you know, an interview. When you control the parameters and the project, you're able to define what you want those skills to be from the outset, which we'll go into in a second. But, you know, instead of trying to demonstrate some experience with a really kind of a fairly far-fetched example from an unrelated sector or an unrelated job experience, you can actually really develop experiences that are so aligned to what you want to be doing because you control the rules. And that leads me on to actually my last slide, because I think, you know, I'd love to have a chance to, you know, discuss and answer any questions and to perhaps get you guys thinking about what your passion projects might be, and to kind of progress that a little bit. But here's, for me, some practical next steps. So develop a minimum viable product. So something that allows you to do the things that I've just talked about, experiment, go and try and, develop the types of skills and experiences that you expect to be asked about by an employer, but develop that MVP first, and do it if you can, without spending loads of money. Try and do it by using tools that are available out there. It might be analytical tools, it might be, free website tools, it might be, tools that are basically, entry level, but a lot of these tools are available and out there, and they'll allow you to experiment. And it almost then allows you to gradually, move from that MVP into something a bit more serious, if that's what you want to do.
Well, let's talk about what the MVP was for route to marketing, so people have got a practical example of that. So we talked about the ideation, which is another term that people should be using when they come up with an idea. That's a kind of startup entrepreneur term, but we spoke about the need. You saw a gap in the market, found a collaborator, and then what was the minimal viable product that we needed to deliver that?
Well, so we're primarily an events business. We try and get people from a marketing background in to talk about, their experiences, and to give advice and support to those who are job seekers within the marketing sort of space. So the minimum viable product was an event. Let's get an event set up. Let's do it without spending money, if at all possible, and let's get some people engaged in it. So we managed to get a really good kind of roster of speakers. We got a recruitment agency, and one of the people we were connected to provide the venue, and to sponsor some drinks as well. And I think we got about 50 or 60 people there. We used Eventbrite, which is free for promoting the event, and we managed to get, I think we got about 100 people signed up, and ended up with about 50 or 60 through the door. So that was the MVP for us, and from there you can then learn all of the things that didn't go as well as you'd have expected or wanted to. You can tailor it, you can tinker around the edges. One of the things that I had in the MVP was the brand as well. That wasn't really required, but that's just because I'm from a marketing background, and I quite like the idea of creating a brand, because it would put a rocket up my backside to actually get it done. So that's why we created the brand. One of the first things we did, but that certainly wasn't part of an MVP. We could have done that way much. It was about 60 quid, I think. So I'm not saying it wasn't already kind of on the cheap, but we could have done it without developing a logo. We could have done that in PowerPoint or whatever to get us started. So if I think about back to the first kind of passion project that I referenced, the blog that I set up was free, completely free. Did it on, I don't even know if the platform exists anymore, but I can't even remember what the platform was. But I did that. That was free. Obviously all of the stuff that I was writing didn't cost me any money, and I was stealing, images, probably not referencing the people who'd taken them. So probably a lesson learned in there, but using stock images and things, and then just using free platforms like obviously LinkedIn and Twitter. So it was really easy to do, and no cost associated at all.
Absolutely. And what that shows, I think, let's imagine that you'd gone for interview then. What that shows is ingenuity, motivation, passion, and someone who's got a bit of a get up and go. And, if I'm hiring for an entry-level job, these are all qualities which are so hard to teach someone. If someone comes in there, it's a bit of a rough diamond. You can see that they've set all of this up on their own volition. That's someone you can really mold and actually trust to come up with good ideas. It's so hard to instill those qualities in people. And actually, away from the formal document of your CV, these are the intangible personality traits that employers are looking for at interview. If they phone you up for a pre-interview interview, they're trying to find out how you talk about things, how you think, how you go about solving problems and putting ideas together. And having a few of these things up your sleeves and being able to frame them in the perfect way is so valuable. And even just understanding the MVP, bootstrapping an idea, you know, like you said, the blog was words on a platform, but it set you apart from other people who had never done that. You know, these little things can be the difference between getting a job and going on the no pile, can't it?
And I think just to build on that, one of the things that, having sat on the other side, having employed people, one of the most frustrating words in an interview is we. So we did this, we did that. An interview is, and it's quite difficult when you're kind of from the west of Scotland and you're quite closed off in how you promote yourself, and you know, it's almost kind of unfashionable to do it. In an interview, that is the time to be talking about I did this, big yourself up. And if you're running a passion project, there's only the option to talk about I, because it's yours, you started it. You know, you didn't piggyback on someone else's idea or whatever. It's yours and you owned it. So it's a great opportunity to be able to develop those examples that you did, not we as a collective, because a lot of the time what happens is people's role in a particular scenario gets overshadowed by the fact that it was a team effort. You know, I'm not saying teamwork's not important, but it's some, you know, an interview is a time for you to talk about what you did, not about what the team collectively did. And then just another point on that is about the demonstrable impact of what you're doing as well. So what did we actually achieve? So, or what did I actually, sorry, I've just fallen foul on my own example there, but what was the result? What was the end result? So when I went into interviews, I could talk about readership. How many people have read this? Where else have I been published? You know, what type of feedback have I got? That stuff demonstrates that you had a goal, an objective, and you can demonstrate that you've actually met it. So the next point there is about being realistic about your time commitment, and I guess that's really important, and it links to the point about this not feeling like work. If you get to a point where I'm not saying don't work hard on it, but if you're starting to lose the interest, that'll almost every time that happens, it's time to take a step back and to reevaluate whether you've got the balance right, because it should still feel like an interest and a passion. It shouldn't ever feel like, you know, you really can't be bothered continuing with this anymore. The third point there is talk to people about it. You know, one of the things that has made route to marketing such a success is talking to people like Nick, and to people that we've had as sponsors and contributors. And the thing about having a passion and interest in something is that talking to people about it element should be so natural. Like, you should genuinely be buzzing to talk to people about this, whether you're talking to them about what you're doing or whether you're talking to them about what they're doing and could either help you or interest you. It should be so natural. You know, when I used to talk, this is going to make me sound incredibly sad, and I know this, but I used to engage in debates on Twitter about employability skills, and they were in the States, so I was waiting till like 1 a.m. to contribute to these, you know, and I'd love it because it was a meeting of minds. You know, you'd have people who were interested in the same things, and we'd be talking on the same terms and debating and discussing, and it would be really, really, you know, a valuable thing for me to then take back into my content. You know, that's the type of stuff that sets passion projects aside. It doesn't feel like a chore. Going and meeting and talking to people about it really does feel like, you know, like something you'd be doing anyway.
I think I want to piggyback on that and say not just people that are in that space, but also talk to, I mean, you and I have both done a bit of coaching or mentoring, and often people, all right, here we go. I'm going to get deep right now. The most exciting thing about working in business and working in employment is that I came to realize that we're all wired differently, right? We've all got different gifts and different skill sets, which are just common sense to us. And something which is common sense to me, I've worked out a way for someone to pay me for what is common sense for me, right? You might have something in your mind which is common sense to you, and then you tell me, and it just blows my mind, and it would take me like a week to even get my head around. And the thing is that we're often so close to the things that we take for granted. So you've done this, this, and this in your passion project or your hobby. Maybe you set up an eBay store or a Depop store, and you've done this, this, and this because it was common sense to you that those were the next steps. That would blow my mind. And I'm saying, right, you've just put together a marketing strategy, you've put together a brand, you've put together a brand tone of voice in the way that you're communicating with customers, presentation skills, and all of a sudden we're putting labels on things that you've maybe never even thought to label. So when you come to interview, you start talking about things, and employers looking at you like, this person is so impressive, and they hardly even know it now. And you touched on it there big time, Chris. When you're at job interview, they're so humble sometimes, and not every recruiter or hiring manager is going to have the time or skill set to pull those qualities out of you. So this whole series is about being really comfortable about what we've already got. And we did a session on SMART goals, looking at things that are measurable and tangible and achievable, but also a way to pick holes in your own game. And certainly talking to other people about your passion projects is a way for them to look at it through a different lens and to help you see it through a different lens. So I just think this is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I suppose that links to the next point about being clear. What you're taking from this, and be able to develop that kind of almost that those labels that you've just mentioned, and what should then become clear is what types of skills have you developed within things that you've maybe never have considered before, and how do you determine the results from that. So it's, your eBay account example is a great one, because how many people would be clocking up revenue that they've generated on eBay, through effectively creating a small e-commerce platform, for themselves. It's about being able to not stretch the truth, not be dishonest, but make sure that you're being very clear on what the results of things were. Because, as I said earlier, often that transferable skill point, there's an obligation on behalf of the employer as well, that if you've painted an example of where you've been, you've demonstrated some capability, they need to kind of join the dots as well sometimes to say, it wasn't exactly relevant in using exactly what we do, but I know from what they've demonstrated and their attitude and their capabilities that we could quite easily train them to do what we need them to do. And it's about trying to get as close to those matches as you can. So no, it's a great point. And then the last point really is, is linked to all of that, and that it shouldn't feel like a job, but certainly when you're coming to talking about it and articulating it on CVs and in interviews and on application forms, it should just treat it like a job. No one's going to penalise you for saying, I also had this project on the side, which I did, just because no one employed you to do it. And in fact, it'll work in your favour if you said, I got off my backside and I did this on the side while I was also doing X, Y, and Z, because it shows that you've got that drive and determination. And it also demonstrates to the employer that, if you didn't feel like you were getting what you needed, you went off and did it yourself, and that's a really big trait, I think, a bit of entrepreneurialism, being able to apply some entrepreneurial thinking within an organizational context, and, be a bit more disruptive and go and get things when you think you need them. So yeah, I guess just treat it as any other job experience.
Well, let me tell you about my own experience with that then, if you guys could indulge me for a minute. I mentioned that I was working in coffee for 10 years, and not taking anything away from hospitality at all, but I felt underemployed during that time, and I would take every opportunity that I could to take on more responsibilities and to take opportunities to explore other things that I was passionate about. And the company I worked for in Edinburgh, the guy owned 6 different coffee shops, and they all had different names. and they all had different customer demographics. So we had like the wee granny coffee shop down in Morningside, if anyone's familiar with Edinburgh. We had like a student coffee shop, a hipster one, a more businessy one. And I took it upon myself to build the music playlists that I felt represented each one of those brands. So all of a sudden I was creating brand identity through the atmosphere in the shops. And I would do this in my own time. And then I took it to my boss and I was like, look, I've done this. And then he started paying me by the hour to do this when I wasn't making the coffees in the shop. You know, so all of a sudden I'm kind of a brand manager for the personal experience that the customers are getting in the shop. And then when I come to talk about that in job interview, businesses can see really quickly, right, this guy quickly understands what our company is about, what our customers need to feel about our company. And that's branding in general. That was before I even had a marketing degree or anything like that. So it's that kind of ingenuity and taking chances and not waiting for permission to indulge the things that you're interested about really helps to set you apart from other people that might have similar experience in the job market too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've got a couple of questions coming in, Chris.
Great, that's good timing then, because that is my next slide.
Good. Just before we end on that, I want to tie back to our session we had on SMART goals. And you've mentioned, you know, something that's measurable there. You know, that's not just important, I think, for how you communicate it, but also for your own mental health, to know, like, when will I know if this is going well? When will I know if I've achieved something? So setting goals within that, you know, if it's a YouTube channel or an Instagram channel, you know, what follower goals do you want to have? What kind of engagement do you want to have? And monitoring that really gives you a sense of how you're advancing in this project. But again, I think one of the things you said is if it's not fun, then, you know, work out why it's not fun for you anymore and don't put yourself under pressure. It shouldn't feel like work. I want to kick us off with a question. You know, how would you go about presenting a passion project to an employer? Is it something you might put in your CV if you're missing lots of practical experience?
Yeah, I've just seen the question, so I think that's kind of quite aligned to Laura's question. So it depends really. So my gut would say, yeah, put it down as an experience in the same way that you would a job. You know, it depends. It really depends on what you've already got and the experience and sort of employment history side of things. But I wouldn't be scared to use it as an employment experience. I guess the acid test there is what will present it in a way that will either have an employer, like, you know, really review it on a CV, or ask you a question about it in an interview. The risk is that if you put it under hobbies and interests, you know, that little bit at the end of your CV where you keep a couple of sentences, you know, like running and football or something. If you put it in there, it will get lost. So I guess to my last point is, if you genuinely see it as a experience where you can demonstrate tangible results and experiences and skills developed, put it in like any other. You know, you might want to reference it as, you know, on the side I did, or, you know, you're not going to have an employer for it. But I think, you know, give it the importance it deserves on a CV. I don't know, Nick, obviously you review far more CVs than I do, but I don't know whether you've got any more kind of practical advice on it. But
yeah, I mean, a lot of the time we like CVs, but we love covering letters. And if someone is relating, if they're looking at the job spec and they're taking the requirements that employers are looking for, and then they address those requirements in the language that's in the job advert, first of all, that's jumping off the page for me that's looking for relevance. But if then they can relate it to something practically that they've done, it doesn't matter what it is. If they've started a dog walking club in lockdown to earn a bit of spare change and get dogs out of people's houses while they're working from home, talk to me about that. How did you get the message out? And one of the most exciting things is hearing people talk about something that you don't personally understand. I'm a cat person, I don't have dogs. I would love to hear about how you grow a dog walking club or dog walking business, you know, to hear people express in their own words what they're passionate about, how they saw a problem, how they took advantage of that opportunity, and what the results were. That's a really exciting person that I want to put forward to an employer so that they can take that enthusiasm to this new opportunity. So yeah, just don't be shy. If you're interested about something, then really own it. And the most exciting thing for me is like hearing people geek out on something which I don't know anything about. It's super interesting. So Lindsay's asked, does it put employers off if you talk about projects that you've done because of ill health, perhaps where you weren't able to work? Have you got any thoughts on that, Chris?
I was hoping to get a bit of clarity on that. So is that the case, that you've done the project because you couldn't work due to ill health, or is it a project that relates to that ill health? Or I don't know if Lindsay's able to.
You can unmute yourself if you like, Lindsay, to clarify that, or we can conjecture. Well, certainly we've just done a project with women returners who have had taken a career break for care responsibilities, and the big message we had there is to own it, to put in your CV, look, this was my career break, whether it was planned for childcare or perhaps unplanned due for ill health, and to talk about that, because there's nothing worse in a CV than an unexplained gap. So reframe it, own it yourself. And this whole session has been about owning, yourself, what you're putting out there, the narrative you're putting out there about yourself, and talk about what you were doing during that time, what you learned from that, and perhaps what you've taken from it as a person. Has it made you more resilient? Has it changed your values? Has it changed your priorities in life? All these things are really helping to contribute to how an employer sees you as a whole person, rather than just a bunch of experiences and skills on a CV. I don't know if that answers your question, Lindsay.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo a lot of that, and I'd also say, I guess, Lindsay, if the projects have been, oh, there we go. No, is the answer to your question. I don't think it should. Talking about ill health should put employers off. And I think if your passion project relates to that ill health, and you're being, it's something that you've developed a passion around because of ill health, or I think that demonstrates a lot more to be positive about than it does to be negative about. And to Nick's point about, bringing your whole self to the table when you're talking to employers, if they understand, if it's relevant and it relates to the experiences and skills that you've got, then I would just talk about it honestly and candidly, because don't leave the employer with any gaps to make up their own story, I guess. Bring your story to the table and talk about it in the context of skills and experience, if you can. If you've had ill health and it's caused you to take action and to do things that, outside of your work or in place of work, that's allowed you to develop skills and experiences, then I think, just be honest about it and talk about it in a positive way, because, as I say, if you don't, you'll leave more questions than answers, I guess.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think employers will fill any gaps that they see with worry. And that can only reflect poorly on you. I think one of the strange upsides of the pandemic is that, every business, regardless of size, has had to really think about their employee well-being and mental health, and to meet people where they're at in terms of their life commitments outside of the office, working remotely, working flexibly, and really focusing on how they can keep people engaged and happy when they're working. So, yeah, the strange upside of that is that every company should have a really solid HR practice into how they're bringing people in now. And you should never be ashamed of that. I think if the pandemic's taught us anything, is to not to take each other for granted, and to recognize that we're all coming from different places. And that's really been reflected in the employers that I've spoken to recently, and the protocol they put in, and how they onboard people, how they communicate new opportunities. And, employment is as much about what they can do for you as you could do for them. So don't be shy about who you are, or what experiences you've had, or where you want to be. It's just about being comfortable about communicating that in a way that people can understand, I think.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, just Lindsay said that, thank you. Just, is that answered the question, Lindsay, or is Is there anything, and Laura as well, who had a question before, was that, if you want me to expand on any of that, then just type. Great, she said yes, brilliant.
Good.
I guess just to build on that final bit that you mentioned there, Nick, that is so important when it comes to finding a job. When you're a job seeker, there's a temptation to just take anything that's going, and just be thankful that you're in a role that soon becomes pretty old. That becomes that relief that you've got a job doesn't last very long, in my experience. So creating an environment within the recruitment process on both sides, where you're both figuring out each other and making sure that you're both giving an authentic version of yourselves, is so important, because you want to be in a job that, first of all, you're appreciated in, and that is what it said on the tin, and ultimately you want to be able to portray the real you as well, so that the employer can, because there's almost I keep saying this, there's almost then an obligation on the employer's part, if they've seen the real you, to think, we know the culture really well here, we know how people operate, we know the things that stand us apart and make us different as an employer. Would this person, knowing what I know about them, fit? And that's as much of on your part a duty of care, on their duty of care to you, as it is for you to get the role. So it's really important to be authentic on both sides, I think.
Absolutely. Well, look, I think that's a really good place to end on today. Chris, Great. Thank you again for coming in and sharing this with us. I think it's really resonated with people, and I hope people are feeling a bit more comfortable about what they've already got going on in their lives, which can help them with their next opportunity. Someone's asking if we can watch it anywhere. I might put this one back up on YouTube. I've not done it with the other ones, but this has been such a great discussion. It would be a shame not to. Chris, thanks again. I'm going to put. No
problem. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to put a link to the Route to Marketing LinkedIn in our wrap-up email. You've put your email address there, I guess, if people really want to reach out and tell you how amazing this was.
No problem. It's on. It should be on screen. I can't grab it from the current cycle.
I'll pop it in the email if you're comfortable with that. I'm just going to drop a link to the rest of the sessions. Next week, we have got another former intern, someone who got an internship opportunity with us many, many years ago, like Chris, in Laura Griffin, who is an entrepreneur and a creative strategist. And she'll be talking about creativity as her superpower, starting a business during the pandemic, but also how her past experiences in work have helped her to define her values, her boundaries in the workplace, what she will and won't put up with, to help to tailor the relevancy of the things that she puts her energy and attention into, and also how that's helped her to build resilience in the workforce and her career as well. So that should be a really great session as well. I hope you all can join us again next week for the employability session. Bring your lunch, tell your friends, tweet us, and thanks again from Chris to Route to Marketing for your time today. And I hope to see you all again next week. Thanks.